Good evening. Welcome to Inside Out. I'm Pat Smith, and this is where we take you inside state, local, and federal government to bring information out to you. Helping me do that tonight is our Democratic candidate for Lieutenant Governor, running with gubernatorial candidate
Ben Jealous.
Ben Jealous, and here to tell us about the gubernatorial campaign. But before we get to that, you've had a lifelong involvement in politics, government, and the Democratic structure of the Democratic Party. Tell us about yourself.
Sure, Pat. Pat, I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio. My dad was a cab driver. My mom worked in a department store, and I came to Maryland in 1973 to come to graduate school at the University of Maryland. I met my husband a few months later as we were both working for United States Senator Howard Metzenbaum.
Okay.
And we have raised our family in Montgomery County since 1979 when we first moved here. In 1982, I walked into Mike Barnes' campaign office. I was pregnant. I had a 2-year-old, and I walked in to volunteer because I was unhappy with who the potential Republican candidate was going to be. It was a woman who had worked against desegregating our schools in Montgomery County, and I just didn't want her to be our congresswoman. So I walked into Mike's office and I said, "I'm here, I'd like to volunteer." They looked at me and thought, "What's wrong with her? She's pregnant, and she has this little boy. How is she going to do this?" And I did it from home on the phone and became a real active volunteer for Mike Barnes. And then it never stopped. I chaired the first major fundraising event for the Montgomery County Democratic Central Committee. I was elected to the Central Committee in 1990. I served as chair of the Montgomery County Party in 93 and 94. Got extremely involved in the campaign in 92 and was elected to the Democratic National Committee, and then served Maryland as the Democratic National Committee woman until 2011. In those years, I was chair of the Women's Caucus of the Democratic Party nationally, where I brought more women in and took the organization from being in a small little conference room into a ballroom, basically. And then I was able to be elected. I was appointed first and then elected vice chair of the Democratic National Committee, and worked with Howard Dean to create a 50-state strategy, which helped us take over the House and Senate in 2006, and then elect Barack Obama in 2008. Then I came back and I came home to Maryland to do more here locally. I had worked on campaigns all those years, but in 2009 and 2010, I led the Maryland Democratic Party. We had more boots on the ground and more engagement in 2010 than ever before. We had 120 staffers, and we had 125,000 more voters, Democratic voters, vote in 2010 than 2014.
Wow.
In 2014, we didn't have that. So this campaign I see as this great opportunity to be working with Ben Jealous, the former head of the NAACP, who has a history of bringing people together and making sure that the government is accessible and accountable to people. Ben was named Marylander of the Year by the Baltimore Sun in 2013 because of his work here in Maryland, making sure that we repealed the death penalty. That Ben co-chaired the DREAM Act referendum. He also was instrumental when others had failed and it looked like marriage equality wasn't going to pass. He enlisted the resources of the NAACP and the faith community across our state to really get into it. And they adopted this that's the saying of the Three Musketeers. It was all for one or one for all. And so the signs in Maryland were for the death penalty, for marriage equality and the DREAM Act, and all those rose. And we won all of those battles at a time when no one thought that was possible. No one thought that was possible. So I am so excited to be running with this businessman who is an entrepreneur, who is creative, engaging, and who has this long family history in the state of Maryland.
Right, right.
His history is amazing. His grandparents came to Maryland in 1941. His grandfather to work on the railroad as a porter. His grandmother to work at Planned Parenthood. And she, after...
In 1941.
In 1941. In 1941. And then Ben's mother was part of the Brown versus Board of Education cases, where she helped integrate and end the segregation in Baltimore County schools. That's something. And then here his grandparents and his parents then could send him off at some point to be a Rhodes Scholar. It's an amazing story,
Right.
and it's Maryland's opportunity. I mean, where I think Ben and I come together is this notion of education helped bring his grandparents and his mother out of poverty. And education has opened up doors for him in this remarkable way, so that he could become the youngest ever head of the NAACP. And education made a difference for me, and took this child of an immigrant and allowed me to have the kind of life where my kids could grow up through the Montgomery County Public Schools and have every opportunity. Everybody deserves that, Pat. Everybody deserves what we were able to achieve through education.
Right, right. I mean, I have a very similar story, certainly. I mean, my father rose very high in the state government of Massachusetts, and he never graduated high school. So he became an adjunct professor at Boston University and Merrimack College in state and local government matters, and ended up his career after elected office at FinCom, which is the Finance Commission of the state of Massachusetts. So education is very, very important.
And that's why we're so proud of having the endorsement of Maryland's MSEA, the Maryland State Educators Association, 74,000 teachers and educators across our state. It is remarkable. Not only did we get the endorsement, but 85% of the teachers voted for that endorsement, including 100% of the teachers in Prince George's County.
Wonderful.
It's
Now
pretty
you got to
exciting.
get them out to the poll.
Well, they're also, the teachers, I think we in Montgomery County are very familiar with the Apple ballot.
Right.
And I think we'll be seeing a lot of Apple ballots all over our county and across the state.
And they have the day off from school.
They have the day off from school. And we have been working, I'm actually going to Wacomico County later. And having dinner there. But we've been traveling across the state. We met with the teachers, and what we heard from the teachers was really clear. The teachers are underpaid across the state, and one of the things that happens, and it's really interesting in Montgomery County, so many of our teachers can't afford to live here with the pay that they have. So they live in Howard or Frederick, and they're driving in long distances for long times every single day. Our educators, in some cases, aren't even paid a livable wage across our state. That's wrong. Our kids don't have the resources they need. So we want a program where we're going to have a universal pre-K. We want to have make sure that our teachers are paid the salaries they need, and our educators have that livable wage. And we want to make sure that kids graduate from high schools prepared for a career.
Right, right. Because college isn't for everybody.
Exactly.
And we have great opportunities here in Montgomery County, but not throughout the state, as far as for trade education.
Exactly.
And those artisan trades are very respectable careers and positions.
Right. I mean, we need certain positions in
Yes,
our
we
state,
do.
and we don't have the people here trained to take those jobs. For example, we have a shortage of construction managers. We could use 3,000 construction managers in our state, and the biggest program has 24 at Morgan State. That's crazy. That's what they graduate a year. The other thing about it too is that I came to Maryland after 3 years of college. I was able to do college in 3 years, and that saved me enormous amounts. I had put together college loans and grants and my father's tips, quite honestly. And what it allowed me to do was to be able to get into graduate school, to go through a graduate school program. But think about having more of these programs in the high schools. We have some now in Montgomery College students. High school students can go to Montgomery College, but what if we really accelerate that so that when a child graduates from K through 12, they would have enough credits to also have an associate's degree. What that does is make college more affordable too. We have plans for the K through 12 program on our website, benjealous.com. We have extensive plans on making college more affordable, including free community college. We think that is important to really take us into the 21st century. Look back at, I mean, my mom didn't graduate high school either, and it wasn't a deal breaker. And when you look back through history, in our country, people were graduating college, or they were graduating at 8th grade at a certain point. Then we expanded it to 12th grade. Well, now we need pre-K, and we need those extra 2 years. The other thing that Ben Jealous has done over the last several years is work on high-tech investment and working as well in the incubator at Johns Hopkins. And he's been investing in socially responsible companies across our state and across the country. What Ben has learned through all of this is that what we could be doing right now is investing more in our health technology and make Maryland the cybersecurity center for the country, bringing in more jobs. But what he's learned through this, a couple weeks ago we had Google and Alphabet, which is the holding company for Google, into Maryland. And we met with them, and one of the things that becomes very clear is you need to bring programmers, and that there are more programmers of color here in our state than basically anywhere else.
Really?
And programming, in some respects, you only need 2 years. You don't need a master's degree. You need 2 years of specialized training. So people could go through programs in community colleges, graduate, and really have a career.
Exactly.
That's what we're looking for.
In addition to programmers for people that want to know, and they're in the community colleges throughout the state, running medical equipment, doing echograms or doing performing all sorts of things. Time for us to take a quick break. We'll be back shortly. My name is Pat Smith. You're watching Inside Out. With me is Lieutenant Governor candidate Susie Turnbull. We'll be right back.
I understand. I know it's not your typical resume.
Okay, well.
But candidate. But I've been working double shifts just to pay for books. I've been raising my 2 little brothers. I'm determined, driven, motivated. Isn't that what you're looking for?
Look beyond the resume and discover new ways to develop great talent at gradsoflife.org.
heart doesn't see race. Love is love.
Welcome back. You're watching Inside Out, and I'm Pat Smith. This is where we take you inside state and local government to bring information out to you. Helping me do that tonight, continuing, is Susie Turnbull, a candidate for lieutenant governor, running with Ben Jealous as the gubernatorial candidate. Susie, just before the break, we were talking about community colleges and kids in local high schools being able to start there. And our program has actually started to become a model around the state. You mentioned earlier that you were going to Wicomico County campaigning today. And Warwick Community College, the Worcester Wicomico County Community College, is doing the same thing, modeled after us, and very, very successful down there on the shore. And you also mentioned when we were off, said about keeping our students here in Maryland. They get educated in part, by the community college system, and we have a great state college system. But it seems if they don't get into College Park, they just ignore great institutions like Towson or UMBC or Salisbury or Frostburg. I mean, all over Maryland, Eastern Morgan, all these great, very, very fine schools. And it's very difficult to get into College Park.
It's really interesting. Ben Jealous, who has this great experience in doing big things, looks at where we're moving and says one of the big things that we need to do is end mass incarceration, because that is the reason that we're not able to spend as much on our higher education or our K through 12. And so what we have is a full formed plan that is on our website that is the only plan of all of the candidates to end mass incarceration. He tells a story, and it goes back to the schools. He used to meet and see the president of Penn State University. And the president of Penn State University said every year he'd go to Harrisburg, and it would be the same thing, deja vu. And what that was he would be fighting for Penn State instead of the state Penn. And what we have in Maryland and have across this country is students and people who are lost to our future because of their incarceration. And it is a criminal justice reform issue. It is an issue of equity. It is an issue of pure safety and dollars and cents. People don't usually ask how much it costs to incarcerate someone. They always ask how much it costs to educate someone.
Right.
And we have to change that. Ben has a history of doing that. Big things. When he pulled people together in Georgia and Texas as head of the NAACP to do just that. I mean, at the same time, what we're looking forward in moving this is to make sure we don't take little steps. I mean, there is a great bill that passed this year that would make community college free for about spending about $15 million.
Really?
Well, that was a new bill that has been signed. On the other hand, that's just a drop in the bucket.
15 million.
It's a drop in the bucket. And what we want to do is save $660 million a year and put that back into our systems. And you save $660 million by really reducing mass incarceration by about 30%. We could do that. But you can only do it if you bring people together and you come up with a solution and you push with that solution. My experience always has been, and I see this in Ben every single day, is that you need to recognize where you have things common ground, and you aim for that common ground, and then you bring people in that direction. I think people across our county, across our state, are tired of incremental solutions. I talked about Ben's family earlier, and his grandmother I always told him, and she's 101. I haven't met her, but I feel like she should adopt me at this point because I love her sayings. She used to say to Ben, and still does, Ben, you can't solve half a problem, because then you still have a problem. And I think what Ben Jealous, whose grandmother trained Barbara Mikulski to be a social worker, has taught me and has basically reinforced, in my view, is that it's time to do big things again in Maryland. We used to have the first, schools were first in the nation, and now they're sixth. We haven't fully funded our schools. We have not lived up to the promise of the casino money. It hasn't come back in the ways, and Governor Hogan has not fully funded our schools. The legislature had to force him to. This year, there's a referendum that's going to be voted on in November to make sure that certain dollars are funded for our schools. But that's just part of the story. We need to fully fund our schools. Maryland has not taken on Pruitt. Our governor has stood with Donald Trump cabinet secretaries. He has not fought Pruitt, who could ruin our bay. He has not fought Betsy DeVos. In fact, he brought Betsy DeVos and toured her around Montgomery County schools, and to Baltimore as well. What we need is someone who looks at where we are and says enough is enough, whether it's banning every assault weapon, including the one that has been used on the 15 that's been used all over our nation. It is a loophole in our laws here in Maryland. We need to fix that. It's building a relationship and a coalition with regional governors and the mayor of DC to make sure that we really are addressing the gun trafficking across our state. It is looking at priorities and making those priorities first by doing participatory budgeting to get more people engaged. Ben and I have worked our entire lives, our entire careers, in bringing people together. He has managed major organizations. Managing the NAACP, as you can imagine, you're talking about tens of thousands of supporters and volunteers and activists, as well as employees in divisions across the country. We're not running to manage the legislature. We're running to manage a government and to make government more responsive, to be to do the customer outreach that's necessary, and to listen to what people have to say. That's the best part of the whole campaign, Pat. I have been traveling across the state, Ben has, and people are telling us what they need. They're worried about the opioid crisis. They are worried, and our governor has not funded even what the legislature passed a year and a half ago. So looking at it now, we have a full-fledged plan to move that, because that problem is not just in one municipality in our state, it is across the board. We need to have more mental health care facilities. We need more clinics. We need more opportunities so that kids aren't using drugs because they don't have opportunity and they're in pain. And we need to deal with the violence that we're seeing, and we need to make sure that we have a leader who has the courage to make bold decisions, to have bold ideas, and that is requiring new leadership, and that's why I'm with Ben Jealous, because I, in my long career, have rarely seen anyone who I can look at and say, this person is so smart and so capable and so directed in making sure that everybody gets a chance, that everybody has an opportunity to do well. Look, 25 years ago, and I don't know if you remember this, Pat, but every time I come to Kensington, I think about it, because I was interviewed outside the Circle housing nursing home facility that was a long-term
Was a nursing home facility.
was a nursing home facility, because in 1992, my mother had been living in a nursing home for 7 years, and during that time, they never checked her preventive health care, and a lump was discovered. She had breast cancer, and she died the night of surgery. What I learned when I came back to Montgomery County and talked to friends here and experts was that nursing homes across our country don't do preventive health care. If you come in with diabetes, that's what they treat you for. My mother had a disability, physical disabilities, caused by something similar to Lou Gehrig's disease. I went to work on this, and I went to see Governor Schaefer. So Governor Schaefer was able, in 15 seconds, to recognize this is a problem. We need to stop this in our nursing homes in Maryland. And he put a commission together. He named me to that commission. I worked on that for a year. And on Mother's Day weekend, we announced that from that day forward, nursing homes in Maryland would screen women for breast cancer and men for prostate cancer. Once you've done that, you can see how you can save people's lives, you can make things different, make things better for people, and you can solve problems that don't necessarily require legislation. What it requires is bringing people together to look at a problem and solve it. And that's who Ben Jealous is. And that's who I am. And that's why our partnership is one where we are going to listen to people and help them solve their problems.
You know what I think that is lacking, looking at the results of things in our education system, is that there isn't enough information provided to the students. I know they're young and they're immature and they don't make great decisions, but they really have to know that this is your way to have an opportunity. If you don't get yourself educated, the opportunities are not going to be there. And the alternative of taking drugs or opiates, which lead to criminal behavior, which leads to the incarceration and part of that problem, is a real concern. So with the endorsement of the Maryland Education Association, I would like to see that emphasized. I see many members of the association at lunchtime because they are across the street from me, but on Taft Court in Rockville.
Right.
But I see that as one of the few shortcomings that we have in our education system.
I mean, just last week we met with a lot of the Montgomery County educators. And we actually put something on Facebook Live for those who watch Facebook. And there's some, on the opportunity issue, our teachers really care. They are dedicated to making sure every child does well. That's why they've been spending so much of their own money in their classrooms, because they want the children to have everything they can have. But one of the things that became very clear is that early childhood education, the pre-K, universal pre-K, is the first place to start leveling the playing field.
Right.
And that it's the beginning of opportunity. For those of us who live in Montgomery County, I remember when the issue was which schools would have all-day kindergarten. Well, now the issue is really which schools and how many schools can have universal pre-K.
And we've got to be able to afford that statewide. We're out of time. Susan Turnbull, candidate for lieutenant governor, Democratic candidate for lieutenant governor, with her running mate as the gubernatorial candidate, Ben Jealous. Jealous, Turnbull ticket, vote on early voting in June, and June 26th is the primary, is it?
Right, June 26th is the primary. Early vote is June 14th to 21st.
Plenty of time to vote before the kids get out of school and before you leave town for vacation. I'm Pat Smith. We air on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday at 7:30 here on Channel 16. Have a pleasant evening.